The Illustrated Encyclopedia of World Wars I and II, an authoritative account of two of the deadliest conflicts in human history, with details of decisive battles and engagements. Ian Westwell and Donald Somerville. An illustrated history of the World Wars I and II, with more than 1,000 photographs, maps, and battle plans. Features descriptions of every major battle on land and at sea, with analysis of the success and failure of the various military strategies, describes the factors leading to each conflict, the turning points of both wars, and impact of new technologies on the way each war was fought. Focuses on the central military figures who shaped the course of each war, from General Douglas Haig and Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to Paul von Hindenburg, and on political leaders such as Kaiser Wilhelm II, Woodrow Wilson, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler. Includes expert military analysis of the weapons of war from dreadnoughts, tanks, submarines to jet fighters, assault guns, torpedo boats, and the atomic and the atom bomb. This book is 512 pages long. We'll read the introduction first, which is on page 8, but then we'll come back to read the table of contents, and that will be sufficient for this video. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to read more of this. I think maybe one day I might get like an illustrated encyclopedia of dinosaurs or something. Though I still want to buy another copy of... I had a blue binder full of a bunch of dinosaur stuff in the past. It was certainly regrettable that that binder eventually became lost to time due to circumstances beyond my control. What can I say? I'm a bit sentimental. And even to this day, I still appreciate that my mom got that for me. Even a decade plus after that book is, well, gone. But hey, if I ever do find and purchase another copy of the blue binder, of various, even had 3D glasses with like of dinosaur pictures in it. But I suppose you guys came here to listen about World War I and II, not me reminisce about enjoying reading a book about dinosaurs and my sentimentality. Introduction. World Wars I and II will forever be a scar across the 20th century history. This comprehensive volume chronicles these brutal wars and examines the turbulent political and social climates that led to the first truly global conflicts. World War I was the first truly total worldwide conflict. A titanic struggle between the then leading world powers for not only the domination of Europe, but also the large areas of the entire globe that they had colonized in the 19th century. Even with such high stakes, the outbreak of the conflict was greeted with considerable popular enthusiasm in many, if not all, quarters. This makes me wonder. I have Mass Effect trilogy on my PS5. Would it ever be a good idea to try to read the lore out loud on that? Then again, I'm sure you can find videos of all the lore, or even just the description of all the planets. I have an interest in history, and wars, and technology, and science, and microbiology, and astronomy, and physics, and of course dinosaurs. After years of saber rattling and accelerating arms races, as well as intensifying economic and geopolitical rivalries, it was thought, not just by militarists, that a short, sharp war would bring a new stability to world affairs. Like most wars, World War I turned out in ways that the participants did not anticipate at the outset. Almost everyone thought that the war would be brief, a matter of months at the most. Economic and industrial developments were believed to have made it impossible for fighting to continue for long. In fact, the reverse was true. Industrialization and mass production meant that armies of previously unequaled size could be supplied and kept fighting, leading to a casualty toll never before seen. Military leaders struggled to cope with the consequences of the scale of the fighting and the new technologies involved. It was the first major war of aircrafts, tanks, submarines, quick-firing artillery, poison gas, and much more. That reminds me of a interesting tidbit of, I think it was something to do with France, and I think it was with World War I itself. I don't know if it's mentioned anywhere in this book, probably not. But they wanted to test, they started the idea of having soldiers wearing helmets designed to protect them from, being shot in the head. And they were largely successful, but they did have a major, unforeseen negative consequence, though that negative consequence was actually a good thing. But depending on how you look at statistics, it could be made to make you think that wearing protective headgear is bad. Now, what I mean by that is once they started introducing people to wearing protective headgear to protect themselves, from being shot in the head with a gun, they found that the rate of people needing to be treated in hospitals and taken off the battlefield to be treated for head injuries rose exponentially. And you would think, oh wow, that must mean the helmets must be dangerous or something if all these people are getting head injuries and are getting, they're needing to leave the battlefield to go get treated medically. But that just shows that no matter who you are, if somebody wants to misrepresent something with statistics, it's possible to do that without fudging any of the numbers. Because offhand, if you just show, the amount of people needing to be treated for head injuries went up exponentially. But the reason is that the helmets were doing a good job. Because all those people that needed to be treated for head injuries, under normal circumstances, their brains would have been blown out of their skulls. So the reason why there weren't people getting treated for head injuries in the past is because they would just be dead. So the helmets were in fact saving these people's lives. However, you now needed to treat and take care of the people that are still alive, albeit injured. Whereas before, they would just, become a corpse. The fact that this is a thing that people would complain about, does bring up some ethical issues. But make of that whatever you will. Let me see where I was. It is hardly surprising that generals sometimes failed to make the best use of these novel resources, however few were the stupid and unfeeling blunders of popular belief. When the Great War ended, after more than 4 years of bitter combat, in which the outcome was in doubt until the final stages of campaigning, few were really able to comprehend the sheer scale of the destructive events they had witnessed. Empires had toppled, new countries had emerged, and the United States had been transformed into an international colossus. Despite the heavy loss of life, the victors could at least console themselves with the thought that they had won the war to end all wars. The popular rendering of the title of H.G. Wells' overly optimistic 1914 book entitled The War That Will End War. Yet the peace they had secured at such immense cost was transitory and was destined to last just 2 decades. Below, people everywhere welcomed the outbreak of the war. These young Berliners have been called up to serve in the German army 1st of August 1914. On the one hand, every one of these pictures looks like like I said, you should buy the book. Here's another picture. Below, troops blinded by poison gas wait for medical attention. Every major army used gas by 1918, though this would have been deemed barbarous a few years before. I'm pretty sure chemical weapons are considered banned even for the use of warfare, though there are certain places that will even use chemical weapons like chlorine gas and such things on civilians, even their own citizens. There's also a picture up here of some people doing some trench warfare. Within only a few years of its end, many people, even those living in the victorious countries, were questioning whether World War I had been a just and necessary war. The same has never been true of World War II, either in the immediate aftermath or in the terms of longer historical retrospect. The unmitigated evil that was at the heart of Hitler's Germany, and the unrestrained and brutal cruelty of the Japanese regime to its prisoners and subjects were both so plain that at the time and since few have argued that it was a war that was not worth fighting, although the world soon moved into the Cold War. Below, London's St. Paul's Cathedral surrounded by fire. During the Blitz, autumn 1940, St. Paul's survived with little damage, a symbol of Britain's defiant resistance. Below, Soviet infantry climb out of their trench to attack nearby German positions during the vicious close-quarter battle for Stalingrad in the late autumn of 1942. Below, Hitler youth fighters who have knocked out Soviet tanks are decorated by their leader outside the Berlin bunker, where he would commit suicide days later. Above, emaciated survivors of the newly liberated Buchenwald concentration. Since it's German, should I pronounce the W as a V sound? So, as a native English speaker, I look at this word and I would think it would be Buchenwald. Buchenwald. But if I were to speak it like if I was reading it as a German word, which, it'd be Buchenwald, I think. Buch, 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 I can't fucking talk. Buchenwald. Buchenwald. Whatever. Concentration camp. Talked to some of the American troops who freed the camp 18 April 1945. An era of potentially even more dangerous confrontation. Few have ever suggested that the many Allied lives that were lost in World War II were lives that were sacrificed in vain. Far more than any previous major war, World War II saw civilians effectively in the front lines. In part, this arose from the murderous nature of the totalitarian regimes of both Hitler and Stalin and the vicious racism of Japan's militarists. But the Anglo-American bombing campaigns meant that those countries' leaders also had far from clean hands. Unlike World War I, the first war of the combat aircraft, the tank and the submarine, there were no new types of weapon of any importance introduced until almost the very end of World War II. The major military developments was the extension of the use of air power to a level far beyond anything previously attempted or contemplated, and many of the World War II battles were fought in the sky. Developments in radio and electronics technology also meant that both in the air and on the ground operations could be directed with a new level of sophistication. Tank commanders could talk to each other, aircraft could be detected hundreds of miles away, and radar could find the hidden periscope of a submerged enemy submarine at sea. The war's one new weapon was obviously the atom bomb, which clearly changed the nature of warfare for all time. Its huge destructive power was so great that even when no nuclear retaliation was possible, its owners might hesitate to use it. Now, what's interesting about this, and hopefully it's never a thing that we see in, real life, but the bombs dropped at Higurashi, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were atom bombs. They're fission bombs. Whereas most thermonuclear bombs of modern design are hydrogen bombs, essentially. Now, it's more complicated than that, but it's more of a fusion rather than fission. The main point being is this. Even among the weakest of hydrogen bombs, they're about 100 times stronger than what was dropped on Hiroshima. And we have several types of nukes that are even stronger than that, and of course there's the potential of many going off at the same time. But the main point is this. Between the increase in population density and the increase of the power of a nuke, if a hydrogen bomb were to be detonated in any major city, the devastation would be so severe that what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki would pale in comparison. That being said, I think a very endearing thing, though, is that there actually are, now granted I've never been to Japan, but I believe there are museums in Hiroshima, and many people are dedicated to the idea of basically avoiding that stuff ever happening again. That, heck, if I can find the clip on YouTube where a guy from Japan talks about it, I'll include it in the description. I'll have a link there. I guess the main point is that peace is very important. Now let me figure out where I was reading over here. With such a dire threat to the future of humankind and existence, it was in a sense just as well that people had seen The horrific realities, the flattened cityscapes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and heard the dreadful evidence of the horrors of the Holocaust, the propagation of the knowledge of just how terrible wars could be, and the realization of the truly awful power that man now had the ability to harness, may have served to make the citizens and governments of the world more likely to resolve their differences peacefully. This is perhaps the lasting benefit brought by World War II. A terrible devastation, so complete that its echoes are still reverberating today. How this book is organized. This comprehensive work is split into 2 equal-sized parts, focusing in depth on each of the world wars. Each has 5 main chronological chapters, each one looking at a different phase of the war, plus an introductory chapter on the causes of the war, and a concluding chapter on the war's aftermath and long-term legacy. Each chapter is split into separate 1 or 2 page sections that cover the war's major battles and campaigns, or the developments in the weapons and machinery that were used. In addition, there are feature boxes on a variety of subjects, including key personalities and points of special interest. Added together, all these elements provide a detailed, highly illustrated history of World War I's and II that explains every stage of each war's progress, how the wars were fought, and the global implications of each. Now the next page, World War I, 1914 to 1918. Image: British troops listen to a chaplain delivering his Sunday morning service from the open cockpit of a World War I aircraft in 1918. Now, let's mosey our way through the table of contents. Page 18, the introduction. Page 12, the beginning of World War I. Page 14, timeline. I won't bother reading the page numbers. You guys know there's 512 pages in the book. Assassination at Sarajevo, July 1914. The road to war. Allied war plans. Austro-Hungarian and German war plans. 1914. Europe goes to war. The German invasion of Belgium. Frontier fortresses. Heavy artillery. The battles of the frontier. Reconnaissance aircraft. Mons-en-le-Cateau. Field artillery. The Battle of the Marne. Rifles and bayonets. The race to the sea. First Battle of Ypres. The invasion of Serbia, 1914-15. Russia's invasion of East Prussia. Cavalry. The Battle of Tannenberg. Operations in Poland and Galicia. Operations in China and the Pacific. Surface raiders. Germany's African colonies. Naval war in the North Sea. Anti-submarine barriers. Caronel and the Falklands. Battle cruisers. 1915. Trench warfare. The Second Battle of Ypres. Like I said, I don't know how to pronounce it. YPRES. Gas warfare. The Second Battle of Artois. Trench systems. Battle in Champagne and Artois. Early fighters. Winter offensive against Russia mortars. Germany's Gorlice-Tarnow offensive balloons. 4 battles along the Isonzo, attacking the Dardanelles. Pre-dreadnought battleships. Gallipoli the landings. Seaplanes and flying boats. The Caucasus Front, 1914-16. Palestine, 1914-16. The Mesopotamia Campaign, 1914-16. The Wider Wart Sea. Gallipoli, the withdrawal. German submarines, home fronts, Zeppelins, civilians under fire, 1914-18. Heavy bombers, 1916, the year of attrition. Verdun, the German attack, the first day of the Somme. Machine guns, Verdun, the French recovery. Trench warfare weapons, attrition on the Somme. British tanks, Russia aids its allies. The Romanian campaign, camouflage, stalemate on the Italian front. Seaplane tenders and the aircraft carriers. Operations in Salonika, 1916-17. The War in East Africa, 1914-18. What's the name of that song? I love the rains down in Africa. And also there's like Rammstein did Sehnsucht. To Africa, Sehnsucht. I don't know. I never promised I'd focus. The Battle of Jutland. Dreadnoughts. The rise of U-boats. Destroyers. Naval war in the Mediterranean. 1914-16. Torpedo boats. Allied submarines. 1917. Sleepy. Europe's year of trial. The Battle of Arras. Light bombers. The Nivelle offensive. French and German tanks. The Battle of Messines. Mine warfare. The Battle of Passion, whatever. Coastal fortress and railway artillery. The Battle of Cambrai. Aces and fighter tactics. The February Revolution. The October Revolution. The Battle of Caporetto. The first battles of the Caucasus. The Battle of Beersheba. The Mesopotamian Campaign. Defeating the U-boats. Anti-submarine weapons. 1918 Triumph of the Allies. Operation Michael. Later fighters. Anti-aircraft guns. Germany's final offensives. The Paris gun. The ground attack aircraft. Equipping the Americans. The first American battles. Supply transport. The Meuse-Argonne offensive. Communications. Breaking the Hindenburg Line. Pistols. Armored cars. Final battles in Italy. Liberating the Balkans. The Battle of Megiddo. Cruisers. Germany's naval mutiny. The aftermath of the war. The armistice. The PD. The peace treaties. The League of Nations. And War and Remembrance. And that's on page 256. Next we have War II. Timeline. Approach to war. The legacy of World War I. Failing economies. Fascism and Nazism. Aggression. Europe and Asia. Troubled times. USA and USSR. Troubled times. Western Europe. Europe on the brink, Hitler's triumphs, Poland and the outbreak of war, tanks 1939-42, the Baltic and Scandinavia, heavy cruisers, the fall of France, light bombers, Reese and utility aircraft, the Battle of Britain and the Blitz fighters 1939-42, air combat weapons, tactics and aces, the British home front, medium bombers, the Battle of the Atlantic, anti-submarine escort ships, the Mediterranean theater, the Balkans and the North Africa, torpedo boats and midget submarines, the USA and the European War, German rule in Europe, Operation Barbarossa, Barbarossa, anti-tank guns, horrors of war, the Eastern Front, Japan's Pacific conquests, approach to war in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor, Japan's war plans, battleship and battle cruisers, the USA at war, Japan's first advances, Japan continuing successes, Coral Sea and Midway, aircraft carriers, the turn of the tide, light cruisers, Japan's brutal empire, the great struggle in Europe, to Stalingrad and the Caucasus, the Holocaust, field artillery, Stalingrad, infantry weapons, Soviet winter victories, assault guns, propaganda, art and popular culture, El Alamein, and the advance to Tunisia, light armored vehicles, Operation Torch and victory in Africa, German, so tired. Germans, Germany fights back. Kharkov and Kursk. Ground attack aircraft. Codes and code breaking. The defeat of Hitler's navy. Escort carriers. Naval weapons. Electronics. Allied grand strategy. Medium tanks. Sicily and Italy. Infantry support weapons. Night bombing of Germany. Night fighters. U.S. strategic bombing. Anti-aircraft guns. Heavy bombers. Clearing the Ukraine, heavy artillery, victories over Germany, D-Day, special purpose armored vehicles, the battle for Normandy, medium bombers, resistance, collaborations, crushing Soviet victories, heavy tanks, totalitarian rule, Germany and USSR, the defeat of the Luftwaffe, fighters, aircraft ordnance and electronics from Normandy to the Rhine, self-propelled artillery, unarmored vehicles, the Soviet invasion of Germany, heavy mortars and artillery, rockets, V-weapons, Battle of the Bulge, jet aircraft, anti-tank guns, victory in the West and Italy, infantry, anti-tank weapons, mines and other defenses, the fall of Berlin, destruction of the Japanese Empire, New Guinea and the Solomons, seaplanes and naval support aircraft, the Central Pacific Campaign, landing craft and amphibious vehicles, the Marianas Campaign, Marianas, fucking said marinara like fucking pizza sauce. It's not marinara, it's Marianas Campaign. Everyone's like Lunar stuff. Naval fighters, submarines and bombers, submarine classes, Burma, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, naval bombers, torpedo aircraft, conquest of the Philippines, China's war, victory in Burma, transport aircraft and gliders, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, destroyers, weapons of mass destruction, the Japanese surrender, the legacy of war, casualties and destruction, dealing with the defeated, Europe divided, new nations, the Cold War, picture credits, index, acknowledgements. That being said, something I want to find real quick. When was this book made? I'd like to know when this book was made. When was this book made? Like, this person, like, writing their description about things. When did they write it? Trying to find dates. I see Aness Publishing Ltd. 2024. So I don't know when this, but it's a relatively new book. Okay, so that's something I think it's always important is to know one, when was that book itself published, and when was the first version of it published. It's kind of like talking about, like, say, earlier I mentioned the video game trilogy Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I think it's important to note one, like if somebody was doing a Let's Play of Mass Effect, I think it's important to note one, when are they doing the Let's Play? Like what year and date are they doing the Let's Play? And what year and date did the remaster get released? But also, what year and date was the original version released? Anyway, I feel very sleepy and I am just, obviously when I read more of that I'll just read this very small set. I'm just going to pass out later. Bye.